The last philosopher whose theory of knowledge we're going to look at in depth is Hans Georg Gadamer. Gadamer was born in 1900 and he died in 2002. And yes, he did live to be 102 years old. So Gadamer's theory of knowledge is externalist, reliabilist, and coherentist in nature. Right? It's a form of what's known as hermeneutic ontology. Right? Hermeneutic ontology, so remember, ontology is the study of being. Hermeneutics, I don't believe we've defined in this course. Hermeneutics is the study of the theory of interpretation, right? Or just the study of how we interpret things. Right? So hermeneutic ontology is the idea that we interpret the way the world is, right? And this is what gives meaning and definition to it. It's not like the world concretely exists in only one way. Even if it does concretely exist in one way, that manner in which it exists is open to many different interpretations. So hermeneutic ontology is the idea that we uncover the meanings in everyday life by attempting to understand the signs and symbols of our culture and tradition in juxtaposition with other cultures and traditions, even if those other cultures and traditions are our own in the past, right? Past interpretations, past elements of our culture. Right? So what makes Gadamer so interesting as an individual, or his philosophy so interesting, is that he believes all of our knowledge stands within the tradition in which we grow up. Right? Even as we react against that tradition, the way that we react is shaped by the very history of that tradition. So one of Gadamer's core concepts is called historically affected consciousness. The idea that the way we think is functionally shaped by the time, society, and places that we grew up in. Right? Their beliefs, their culture, all of that. And this forms the basis of how we interpret the world around us. Right? So his theory is coherentist in the sense that, culture has, generally speaking, a coherent set of beliefs, right? That it passes on to us, right? We form our beliefs on the basis of that culture, and as we adapt and change our own belief systems as individuals, we do it in a way that coheres with the tradition that we grew up in. Right? You actually see this quite prominently with comparative philosophers. Right? They tend to do most of their work within a tradition, primarily within whatever tradition they were raised in, right? In a way that fits or matches their philosophical tradition first and foremost, even as they try to accommodate or assimilate other philosophies, philosophical traditions. It's reliabilist because the tradition produces reliable results, right? It gives us a basis on which to, our culture gives us a basis on which to understand the world with repeated, repeated results. And then finally, it's externalist because it appeals to something outside of mental states, right? Our mental states are, in fact, organized to fit the external world rather than the external world being organized in a way to fit our predisposed mind. Right? So one of the things that Gadamer's theory allows for is things like biases, prejudices, and pre-existing beliefs, right? It's designed in such a way as to uphold confirmation bias as an element of thought, not necessarily as a positive or a negative, but it acknowledges it as something that is there in the way we think. Right? Uh, Confirmation bias being you see what you look for, right? And that tends to be one of the major pitfalls of human thought, right? We really only see what we look for. We have a certain set of beliefs. We tend to go towards news sources that support those beliefs. For example, um, in the political, right? We tend to watch MSNBC if we're liberal, or Fox News if we're conservative, and so on and so forth, right? Um, uh, so we look to confirm our own beliefs and biases by going towards what's familiar, right? Uh, this is kind of realistic in a sense, right? It's not to say that, the knowledge that's produced is necessarily entirely truthful, but it is an interpretive act. It does highlight that knowledge is interpretive, right? It's not just purely truth and belief. Justification plays a larger role, perhaps, than belief does, or than truth does, rather, in defining what we know.